The plane crashed. Her mother was gone. Now, 13-year-old Leslie had to keep her 3 siblings alive in the deadliest jungle on Earth. For 40 days, the world looked for them. But what they found was a miracle no one expected. In 2023, a small aircraft carrying 7 people took off from a remote village in Colombia. On board were a mother, Magdalena, and her 4 children heading toward Bogota to reunite with the children's father. The journey, however, took a tragic turn when the plane's engine failed mid-air, forcing the pilot to attempt an emergency landing. Moments later, the aircraft crashed deep inside the vast and unforgiving Amazon rainforest. A large-scale rescue mission was immediately launched. The Colombian military, along with search teams and later indigenous volunteers, began scanning a massive area of dense jungle. After days of searching, the wreckage was finally discovered. Inside, rescuers found the bodies of the adults, including the pilot and the children's mother, but the 4 children were nowhere to be found. At first, there was fear that wild animals had taken them. But nearby, investigators noticed something unusual. Bags had been opened, supplies scattered, and signs that someone had taken food. A baby bottle found earlier in the search confirmed it. The children had survived the crash and left the site on their own. The story from that moment became one of the most extraordinary survival cases in modern history. The eldest child, Leslie, only 13 years old, took full responsibility. Injured and in shock, she gathered her siblings, a 9-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an 11-month-old baby, and led them away from the wreckage. She understood that staying near the crash site meant danger, especially in a jungle filled with predators and harsh conditions. Using what she had learned growing up in a rural environment, Leslie guided her siblings through the rainforest. They survived on wild fruit, sometimes barely edible. She even chewed food to soften it for the younger ones. Water was collected from rain and leaves. At night, they built makeshift shelters from large jungle leaves to protect themselves from rain and cold. The psychological pressure was immense. The children had just lost their mother and were completely alone. The younger ones cried often, asking questions Leslie could barely answer. Despite her fear, she hid her emotions, knowing that if she broke down, they all would. She carried the baby for long distances despite her injury, pushing her body beyond its limits. Meanwhile, the rescue teams intensified their efforts. Helicopters flew overhead, broadcasting recorded messages from the children's grandmother, urging them to stay in one place and trust the rescuers. Bright markers, whistles, and supplies were dropped across the jungle to help guide them. Searchers began finding more clues. Footprints, remains of eaten fruit, and small shelters made from leaves. At one point, a trained rescue dog named Wilson tracked the children and even reached them, staying briefly before disappearing again into the jungle. This gave hope that the children were still alive and moving. However, the operation faced major challenges. Heavy rains wiped away tracks, the jungle terrain made movement extremely difficult, and some rescuers believed the children might be hiding out of fear. Weeks passed, and despite covering huge areas, the children remained missing. Then on the 40th day, everything changed. A small group of indigenous searchers noticed movement in the jungle and encountered the same rescue dog, Wilson. Following its direction, they moved deeper into the forest. Suddenly, they heard a faint sound, a baby crying. They rushed toward it and discovered the children, alive but in extremely critical condition, hiding inside a small shelter made of leaves. The children were severely malnourished, weak, and exhausted. The youngest was close to death, but against all odds, all four had survived. They were immediately carried out of the jungle and transported for urgent medical care. Over time, they recovered physically. Later, when Leslie was able to speak, she described how she managed to keep her siblings alive through knowledge, determination, and sheer willpower.